Wanna talk? So let's talk. Yeah. Talk. You wanna talk? You gotta talk, you need to talk. News talk.
I talk, you talk to Solomon. I talk, you talk to Solomon. Yeah, let's talk to Solomon. Talk to Solomon.
You gotta talk.
Welcome to Talk to Solomon. This is the part of the show that we enjoy most, perhaps, because we have Dr. Alan Tues with us. I'm Stan Solomon, my co-host,
Chief Steve.
former Police Chief Steve Davis, and our guest of honor, former ambassador, former presidential candidate, former senatorial candidate, and current all-around good guy, Dr. Alan Tues. Hey, Alan.
Hi, how are you this evening?
I'm just fine. How are you?
I'm just laughing at that string of formers.
Yeah, well,
keep going long enough, I'll be a former.
yeah, that's right. Well, one thing I cannot say, Alan Tues is not a former liberal. He's not a former pro-choicer. He's not a former pro-socialism. He's not a former atheist. He's not a former agnostic. He's not any of those formers. So,
Well, given what's been happening lately with people like Justice Roberts, I'm not a former conservative either.
you know, you're a mind reader, because that's exactly where I want to start. Governor Perry of Texas has given Washington the one-finger salute and said, ain't going to happen, we're not playing. Governor Scott in Florida, we're not playing. I think we're going to find a number of governors. The governor of Maine just called the IRS the new Gestapo, and I think the Gestapo may sue for the comparison. What is your thought now that we know that there is a new tax in town? We know a tax, if a bill originates in the House, it only takes 51 votes in the Senate and the signature of the president to undo a tax. Let's start there. Do you see that happening?
Oh, I don't know. I guess I still find that the greatest concern, and it's the one I think the governor of Maine is addressing maybe without meaning to, is the fact that Justice Roberts' decision actually turns taxation into a vehicle for burdening and intimidating our population that is apparently, according to Roberts, not subject to constitutional constraint. So even though they had reached the judgment that the federal government could not, in fact, constitutionally impose the individual mandate, yet as a tax, they could impose it because apparently the taxing power isn't subject to constitutional constraint. And I wonder if people have thought that through. Do you think they have? I don't know. Because if the taxing power is not subject to constitutional constraint, and just as an example, you want churches to perform gay marriages, and you pass a bill that says that churches that don't perform gay marriages are going to be subject to some highly damaging tax, right? And of course, that violates the First Amendment and free exercise of religion. But if the taxing power is not subject to constitutional constraint, that doesn't matter. You just say, it's a tax, you got to pay it. And then you send out the IRS. Now, keep in mind, Stan, that the IRS has already been operating under the guise of a system that ignores constitutional rights. Because there is that little thing in the Fifth Amendment, I believe, that says that you can't be compelled to testify against yourself, right? And there they have the income tax form, and you're supposed to affirm and sign it saying X, Y, or Z was done. And then if you put something down there and they want to prosecute you in this way or that under the tax law, they can drag it up and throw it down on the table against you. Well, you've been compelled to testify against yourself. And they say, well, that wasn't compulsion, that was voluntary. Yeah, sure. But that's the system they've already operated under. A system also that people who are subject to it and have been involved with its activities know you're guilty until proven innocent, contrary to the usual way of doing business in our justice system. So these are the people who are then going to be enforcing the extortionary taxes. And extortion not to get money from you, but to get you to behave the way they want you to behave. Otherwise, they will destroy you economically. And as I read this Roberts Court decision, they have now taken the taxing power, released it from constitutional constraint, And therefore, we are in a position where it can be aimed like a thunderbolt at the head of any institution or individual the government pleases to bring them into line with whatever the government wants us to do, regardless of whether that government coercion is actually authorized and allowed under the Constitution. I think that's the most frightening. I won't get involved in this tax talk. To accept the rationale that what we're talking about here is taxes destroys the Constitution. What happened in the Roberts decision wasn't that they suddenly morphed this thing into a tax. Because if he's right about the way they did that, then we don't have a Constitution anymore. And I think we need to talk about that before we get into this let's you and him fight junk about taxation. The Congress never called it a tax. It is not a tax. What Roberts and his buddies did to morph it into a tax is without any warrant or justification whatsoever in the Constitution of the United States. And we should not discuss it. We should not discuss anything on that basis unless we're ready to give up the Constitution, which I'm not.
Well, I couldn't agree with you more. Chief?
No, I agree also, and I'd like to know further, though, is there a possibility, Dr. Keats, if you know this or not, I don't know, but is there a possibility that we can send this back to the Supreme Court? Is it ever a case where the Supreme Court is wrong and we send it back and say, hey, look at it again because here's some more information or whatever?
Actually, if folks would stop using what I think is the abusive language that the court strikes down laws and does this and does that, and if we would go back to the understanding, common in the 19th century, common to Lincoln, common to Andrew Jackson, common to others, the court makes decisions about particular cases that are brought before it. And that means that, for instance, the governors who are basically saying, no, we're not going to do it, people should just look at this unconstitutional junk and say no. And then they could go back to the court, bring case after case after case after case after case, ignoring the irrational, illogical junk that is now being foisted off on us without rhyme or reason by justices and politicians and others who are simply now using the Constitution as a facade for their imposition by force upon the people of this country. That's what I think needs to be done, in fact. But in addition to that, I guess I don't know that we should be so naive as to think that the people who just walked this nation's Constitution over a cliff are going to walk it back. I don't think, by the way, that this was an aberration. When people asked me about Justice Roberts in the past, I was never one of his fans, never believed in him as a conservative, and don't, of course, now. He has always been a go-along to get-along member of the professional legal guild. They are all legal positivists who have rejected the Declaration of Independence, rejected the notion that our rights come from God, and therefore the law, according to them, is whatever the judges say it is and can get away with. And if we want to retain our freedom, we're just going to have to look them in the eye and say, no, you're not getting away with this. And if enough folks, enough governors, enough of the people at large simply dig in and take that position, I'm not sure we can get it reversed, but I certainly think that it's going to, first of all, bring this country to the kind of crisis that, to tell you the honest truth, is going to be needed if we're to stop these people. I think they would love for our Constitution to die with a whimper so that people just say, okay, nothing we can do about it, throw up their hands and walk gently into the darkness of socialist tyranny. But I'm hoping that they won't.
Well, we're with you, and adding our voice, our prayer, and our sacred honor, if I can steal that from our founding fathers. A federal judge has just declared that the National Defense Authorization Act authorization of the elimination of constitutional protection for American citizens is unconstitutional of all things. Your thoughts on that?
Well, I think it's one of those cases. Every now and again, you find in the federal judiciary somebody who has actually sat down, read the Constitution, thought it through, and decided that he shall apply it according to its terms with logic and reason, and reach the conclusion that is required. And I think that the sad thing about it, though, Stan, is that those moments of kind of logic, as opposed to simple arbitrary imposition of power are becoming rarer and fewer. And we are dealing now with a judicial guild that apparently has abandoned the notion that they are subject not only to the rule of law, but to the rule of the Constitution and to the rule of reason, so that what they say has to make some sense. It can't simply take words and use them in any arbitrary and illogical way they please and then impose the result on the rest of us. So I'm pleased to see that a modicum of sanity is retained by some of the individuals in the federal judiciary. But given the record of the last couple of weeks between the Arizona decision and the decision on Obamacare, I don't know that we can hold out much hope that we're dealing with a Supreme Court that is subjecting itself to the same rule of reason and the Constitution.
Well, and I don't know that we can depend on Robbie to pick anyone further to the right than Roberts, which is scary as hell.
Now, can I say one word about that?
Sure.
I know that this is something that in some quarters you're not supposed to do, because we're supposed to look at Mitt Romney and forget his record. But sadly, when he was governor of Massachusetts, not only did he not appoint conservative judges, he went out of his way to neglect the pool of available conservative talent in order to place on the Massachusetts court liberals and folks who were anathema to the very views on things like abortion and gay marriage that he deceitfully, in my opinion, now professes to hold.
Well, that cannot be argued, and we'll have to see what the future holds there, because you can't argue the past. A federally funded study conducted on behalf of the Department of Homeland Security claimed that single-issue groups, such as pro-life groups, had committed terrorist acts over a longer period of time than any group, including Islamic fundamentalists. Now, let's see. There have been, and you can count them on one hand, acts of physical violence, a couple of abortion clinics blown up, a couple of people hurt or killed, and that's not right, and it was roundly condemned by everyone on the pro-life side. And the Islamists, may they rot in hell, have killed hundreds of thousands. Somehow I'm frustrated, but I'm not surprised. Chief?
Well, you shouldn't be surprised, because the numbers are right there where they are. But again, the Homeland Security in the past has accused our returning veterans of being equal to terrorists. And so it appears that anybody who's on the right side of any issue is going to be, in their mind, the enemy, more so than Islamic terrorists, and put on this list.
Now, personally, I'd like to see Janet Napolitano treated like that poor 22-year-old girl in Afghanistan by the Taliban. I think she deserves it, but I'm sure the bullets would bounce off of her rhino hide. But the reality is, we do have in this country an ingrained group in our government, both at the federal and state levels, that consider all moral, Christian, patriotic, Constitution reading, rights given by God believing people to be a problem for America. Is that correct, Dr. Keith?
Well, sadly, it is correct. And Stan, I think the handwriting has been on the wall with this one, at least as far as the leftist presidents like Clinton and Obama are concerned, since the very beginning. I can remember as far back as the Clinton administration, things coming out suggesting that they had drawn up their lists of folks who were to be looked upon as subject somehow to this terrorist rubric or unacceptable rubric, and it included homeschoolers and Second Amendment rights advocates and pro-lifers and so forth. That was, of course, made into official policy in things that were sent out by the Obama faction's Justice Department to state and local police forces around the country, and now it's rearing its ugly head again. I think what this is the fulfillment of is the analysis that made it clear that these things were not being put on the books in order to make war against terrorists. This is especially true, Stan, since according to the Obama faction administration, the war against terrorism is over. They don't even use that term anymore. So obviously this kind of rubric where you say, oh, they're terrorists, they're associated with terror, therefore they have no rights anymore, and we can come in the middle of the night and secrete them away, which is what they've set up in the NDA. How can it be for use in a war against terror that's over? So I've been making this argument for the longest time, that these things were being done for political purposes, and that they're being put on the books in order to provide the instruments that can then be brought to bear against those who, and if you go down the list, and you know what it mostly includes?
You and me.
People who are still loyal to the Constitution of the United States. People who still believe in the concept of unalienable rights, and people who still believe that those rights come from the Creator God, as the Declaration says, not from government. We're the enemy now. And I think that while we're looking at these societies like Syria and elsewhere, where government is making war on its own people, folks in America need to wake up, because all the apparatus is now being put in place that these folks intend to use so that the instruments of power of the U.S. government can be used to war against the people of the United States. I made this point, I think, in the article I wrote a little while ago about the Arizona business, that we have a government that's perfectly willing to let go the security of our borders while it prepares itself to make war on the American people. And that is something that should have people not only deeply concerned, but activists moving in order to make sure that our heritage of liberty is not destroyed. But as yet, too many people are still taking a business as usual attitude during this period when what we're watching is not a mugging across the street. It's the destruction of our Constitution and free way of life taking place right before our eyes. And a lot of people are still trying to act as if everything's okay and get out the banners and the bunting and we're just going to have another election year.
Not true.
Well,
Not
so
true.
it sounds to me like what Dr. Keyes has mentioned is, first of all, you label people that you don't like conservatives, as terrorists. Then you use the new law, the National Defense Authorization Act, and whisk them away to some place where they are not allowed to have habeas corpus and be ever seen from again. And then it's done. You just get rid of your enemies by locking them up forever.
Sounds like 1984. In fact, someone was talking about reading that book again, because that's exactly what they're trying to do, is rewrite history.
Well, but remember, the biggest power that the Gestapo had was the ability to incarcerate civilians without release indefinitely. That was their biggest power.
Alan?
No, I was just going to point out, I know we'll be getting to this later, but I think that when you're gone through a period such as we are now experiencing, when, among other things, I have just come through in the East, this business where we got all our power knocked out for a week and we had this sort of violent series of storms. It was then accompanied by, or was it inaugurated, one of the longest heat waves that we've ever had, with temperatures in the triple digits. And I noticed that you have been reading too, Stan, about, and I've been reading for several years, about the increased solar activity and the fact that we're going to go through a period here for the next couple of years that could be deeply intense solar activity, so strong, in fact, that it would have the impact of electromagnetic weapons on the United States and the world, not just the United States, knocking out the infrastructure of communication and even electricity on which now our civilizations depend, right? And if in the midst of this, I see folks who are preparing to jettison the notion that government is constrained by respect for constitutional rights and so forth, don't you think that as we move into a period where emergency becomes more likely, the hints we're getting that folks are preparing themselves to abuse that emergency in order to destroy our liberty ought to be deeply concerning to us?
Yes, and let's go a step further. There is something called the Olympics. We love the Olympics. Love the young people, although we're told they're all sex fiends now, that are doing their best and have worked their whole lives to accomplish an objective for the pride of themselves and their country. Now we're being told that police in England, a country that's been taken over by morons and Muslims, I just said the same thing twice, is now going to arrest people on the possibility that they might do something wrong. It's potential terrorists. You have the people in London, the rich people, they're saying, hey, don't put your anti-missile batteries on top of our building. You'll make us a terrorist target. Judge said, drop dead. You know, there's nothing you can do about it. You have the Deputy Prime Minister saying that any church that doesn't perform gay marriages, well, they should all be forced or just be dissolved as churches. And you have this latest, we're going to sweep the streets of potential terrorists. And of course, in England, that's anyone who's not a Muslim is a potential terrorist. Anyone who's not an abortionist, anyone who's not a homosexual, anyone who's not a pedophile. You know, those are the bad people because all the others are the ones running the government. Scary, but I see Obama saying, well, shucks and gee whiz, damn, can I get away with that? Well, maybe we'll just sweep the country of Republicans and conservatives before the election to keep them from denying minorities the right to vote. Am I going too far?
Are you addressing me, Stan? Sorry.
Well, I wouldn't address Steve because he knows I go too far. That's why he's arrested.
Well, Stan, I think that we can unhappily see in the things that have been developing over the course of some years now in the UK, the kind of pattern that I think is going to be welcomed by what I call the elitist faction in the United States, whose deepest desire is to Europeanize America in just that way. And a lot of the things that we've been discussing tonight and over the course of some weeks, you are looking at what are the bricks and mortar and iron bars of the prison house in which they mean to incarcerate what was the free people of the United States. And on the same kind of excuses, the excuses of terrorism. And think about that rubric. Anybody who's a potential terrorist, and then we're just talking about the fact that if you're pro-life, if you're for the Second Amendment, if you believe in constitutional constraints, if you dare to suggest that unalienable rights shouldn't be trampled on by government because they come from God, didn't we just say that it has become now the position being taken by the Obama faction Justice Department and its fellow travelers, I guess, in the GOP world, that if you subscribe to these views, you are a potential terrorist. That's what they were trying to do with that argument that somehow pro-lifers as such are somehow more prone to terrorism than even Islamic terrorists. This is all bunk, of course, but why would you be setting people up with a lie like this? Except you mean to use it in order to justify the kind of actions that, as we can see in the UK, are now to be justified against potential terrorists. I think that that's something we have to look at, think through. And when people say, well, you're talking like some kind of conspiracy. So, no, I'm not. I'm talking like a logical person. I'm talking the way the founders of the United States talked when they looked at a pattern of events and they said in the Declaration of Independence itself that people must look for a design in their government to overthrow their rights. And when they see that design, okay, they should cease to suffer while evils are sufferable, but seeing that design for despotism and tyranny, they should then look for ways to alter or abolish the government of those who are thus abusing their power. And I still believe, Stan, deeply, that if folks would wake up even now, at this time, look at what's going on, reject the politics that is destroying our Constitution, and rise to reinvent the politics that corresponds to the activity of a free people, we can still save this situation. But the time is short and late. And I think by now, the fact that there is a design for despotism against the people of the United States is perfectly obvious to everyone, or ought to be. And we need to stop acting like it's not there and start joining together to do something about it.
Alan Keyes for president. We'll be right back on Talk to Solomon. Stay tuned. I like to eat. Do you like to eat? We all do. And usually we run to the grocery store, we run to the convenience store, or we have something in the fridge. But power's been out in parts of this country in the last few weeks. We don't know what's going to come down the pike economically. Smart people are putting in food. Alpine Air Gourmet Reserves is a line of foods that you can put away that will last for a very long time. You know, they say eat what you store and store what you eat. This is great tasting stuff, healthy for you, a full line. You go to our website, cpnlive.com, and click on the button for Alpine Air Gourmet Reserves and see all the different things we have. This is good tasting food. It's reasonably priced. It will last. And it's worth its weight in gold if a problem arises. I know you don't think there's going to be anything that goes wrong. Actually, you do. This is smart. This is smart insurance. This is smart preparation. This is smart thinking. You have kids, you have a spouse, you have parents, you have dependents, you have an appetite. All those things can be addressed by a frugal but smart investment in Alpine Air Gourmet Reserves. Try them out. You will be tickled to death with the taste of them. You know what? In many cases, people start to eat this and they think, heck, this tastes better and costs less than what you're going to the grocery store to buy. cpnlive.com, check it out. Let me ask you a question. Do you like being sick? I have in my hand an incredible product. It's called TR10 Supercolloidal Silver. TR10 stands for a trace to the negative 10th power. The particles in this silver product are 6 to 8 angstroms, 6 to 8 10 billionths of a meter. Now listen to me. Silver has been the magic bullet for all of human existence. The Egyptians used silver instruments. We use silverware. They put silver in your teeth because nothing can grow on silver. Silver will kill anything but liberalism. I'm working on that. This product, you go to cpnlive.com, buy 1 quart of this product. It will last you for a very long time. Anytime you feel like you've been exposed to something bad, take some of this product, spray it in your mouth, or take a little bit and gargle it, swallow it. It will kill any pathogen. The average antibiotic kills 10 to 20 different pathogens. This product will kill 700 plus. Do yourself a favor, do your family a favor, do your doctor a favor. He's tired of seeing you. Get Supercolloidal Silver. Go to cpnlive.com, order the product. It's $29.95 plus shipping. I think it's $39.95 delivered any place in America right to your door. It's worth 10 times that. Check it out. If you're not 100% happy, just return it and we'll give you your money back. You have a computer, if you're alive today, which means you have a hard drive, which means it's going to break down. Mosey, the backup people, for thousands, for Stan, for thousands of people, for tens of thousands of people, is simply common sense. You go to cpnlive.com, click on the icon for Mosey, the backup people, and sign up. It's just a few dollars a month. Let me tell you something. We had a break-in. They stole our whole computer. You know what? When they take the computer, you can't recover anything, but we had Mosey. We had the backup. We were able to restore everything simply by buying another computer. cpnlive.com, click on the icon for Mosey, the backup people, and give yourself common sense, peace of mind, great value, the best thing you've ever done. Sooner or later, it's going to be Mosey, the backup people.